Today we'll be reading a magazine article called Violence Hits Home by Denise Rinaldo. Try to connect this reading to our last reading. In fear, Zoe faces intruders who are trying to break into his house. In this magazine article, a teen struggles against violence in his own community. A bad situation. Growing up in Oakland, California, Antonio Bibb knew about violence. His community has been plagued by murders, battles between gangs, and robberies. So when Antonio heard about an anti-violence program for high school students called Teens on Target, he was intrigued. He was in the 7th grade at the time, but promised himself that when he got to high school, he'd join the group. Antonio knew lots of kids who had lost family members to violence. He felt lucky he hadn't, and he wanted to do something positive. I felt like there was no way to stop violence, but I hoped I might be able to change things a bit, Antonio, now 18, says. He also wanted to show others that he was on the side of peace. Pretty much every adult on my dad's side of the family has been in jail, including my dad, Antonio says. Even when I was young, people were starting to judge me and categorize me because of that. Positive start. In his freshman year, Antonio joined Teens on Target. By 10th grade, he was doing well in school and had become a leader in the program. He got to travel to Maryland for an anti-violence conference. It was more than an extracurricular activity to me, Antonio says. I really felt like I was helping to stop younger kids from making the same mistakes adults and their families might be making. Antonio stands on the street where his uncle was killed. I kept thinking of my little cousin growing up without a father, the teen says. Then one day during his junior year, Antonio received terrible news. Antonio's uncle Michael, with whom he had been extremely close, was shot and killed on a street in a case of mistaken identity. My father told me, and I didn't believe it, Antonio says. It didn't really sink in until I flipped on the news and I saw another one of my uncles on the air talking about it. Antonio says that he walked through the next several months feeling a combination of disbelief and sadness. His family was in turmoil. They were broken, he says. Sometimes Antonio had thoughts of revenge, of turning to violence himself and tracking down his uncle's killer. I kept thinking of my little cousin growing up without a father, he says. Teen in turmoil. Experts say Antonio's reaction was normal for a teen who has lost a close family member to violence. Revenge fantasies are common, says Kenneth J. Doka, a professor of psychology at the College of New Rochelle in New York and an expert in grief and dying. The key, of course, is helping people not act out on those feelings. Thanks to his work with Teens on Target, Antonio understood that and did not seek revenge. The memory of his uncle, who Antonio says was a very powerful and positive man, also helped. In the fall of his senior year, Antonio was starting to feel like his old self. Then tragedy struck again. I lost my best friend in a gang-related shooting, he says. Antonio snapped back into revenge mode, and this time it was worse. I was ready to quit Teens on Target, he says. I felt like I had to get back at somebody. There was no reason for my uncle and my friend to die, and I was going to do something about it. After his best friend was killed, Antonio really struggled with thoughts of revenge. To the rescue. Who kept Antonio from snapping? A woman named Teresa Chartel. Teresa is the Teens on Target program coordinator with whom Antonio had been working since his freshman year. She was his teacher, counselor, and friend. Teresa reminded me that lots of kids we work with were going through the same situation I was, and that now I was in an even better position to motivate them, Antonio says. She said they'd see how I was reacting to my situation, and that would really help them out. Antonio says he took what Teresa said and ran with it. I realized that we're all going to go through pain. It's what you choose to do with it that makes you the person you are. The teen threw himself into his work, with Teens on Target, with more passion than ever. He also vowed to serve as an inspiration for his now fatherless cousin. A lot of kids turn to violence because they see it at school and at home. They don't have strong role models, Antonio says. I'm trying to be that role model for my cousin. Teresa Chartel, Wright, helped Antonio channel his anger over losing his uncle and friend into helping others keep the peace. Root causes. What causes violence? How can violence be avoided? Fear. If someone is afraid to walk down a street, he or she may carry a weapon for protection. A better idea is to talk to someone like a parent, teacher, or counselor who can help resolve a tense situation peacefully. Stereotyping. Violence can result when people are judged by their looks, dress, or whom they hang out with. A better idea is to get to know people before you decide how you feel about them. Bad role models. If kids grow up surrounded by violence, they're going to emulate it. Providing positive role models and teaching kids to act peacefully can prevent future violence. A life's work. Antonio plans to devote his life to the fight against violence. That includes making sure as few people as possible have to go through the kind of losses he's experienced. One of his goals is to reduce the number of guns on the street. If it hadn't been so easy to get guns, I think my uncle would still be living, Antonio says. Now a high school graduate, Antonio has continued to work with Teens on Target and is shopping around for a college to attend. My life is pretty blessed right now, he says. I'm doing exactly what I want to do. Antonio is used to giving advice to kids. Be a leader. Stop following everyone else, he says. It doesn't matter if you can't buy the stuff you think is cool from movies and videos, some Fat Farm or Sean John or whatever it is. Just be yourself. The more you shine for yourself, the more you can shine in front of everybody else.